From our Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has threatened military action against Israel. He is suggesting a possible intervention in Palestine similar to Turkey's past involvement in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. Erdogan's remarks reference Turkey's previous military engagements, including its 2020 intervention in Libya and its support for Azerbaijan in Nagorno-Karabakh last year. Turkey has, however, denied direct involvement in the latter operation. Speaking at the ruling AK party's meeting on Sunday, Erdogan said Turkey must act decisively to protect Palestinians and implied that entering Israel is a feasible option. His televised comments were met with a sharp response from Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz. Katz accused Erdogan of mimicking Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's aggressive stance in invading Kuwait in 1990 and warned him to recall the consequences of such threats. Palestinian groups are calling for an international investigation into the conditions of Palestinians in Israeli jails. This is following reports of the gang rape of a Palestinian prisoner by Israeli soldiers in the Siddiqui prison. According to Israel's Army radio, 10 soldiers were detained for questioning as part of an investigation into the attack on the prisoner, who is from Gaza. The Israeli army is believed to have detained thousands of Palestinians, including women and children, as well as medics, since October 7, 2023. Head of the Detainees and Ex-Detainees Affairs Commission, Qadura Faris, has urged the international community to urgently intervene to stop the unprecedented crimes committed against Palestinian detainees in Israeli jails. Faris affirmed that the Israeli crimes against Palestinian detainees no longer have any conceivable limits, and they constitute a facet of the ongoing genocide. Several reports have emerged of severe abuses against Palestinian prisoners at the notorious Siddiqui facility since the start of Israel's ongoing war on Gaza. Israel has killed at least 37 Palestinians and injured 73 others in strikes over the last 24 hours in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Al Jazeera Arabic reports that the Israeli military targeted the entrance of the Nusayrat refugee camp in central Gaza, killing 10 civilians and injuring multiple people. Israel has issued fresh evacuation orders for Nusayrat and Bureij refugee camps, affecting around 29,000 people. Many have no safe place to go. Palestinians have started returning to eastern Khan Younis after the Israeli military withdrew from the area, which they now describe as a devastated, uninhabitable wasteland. The Israeli army declared the Khan Younis operation is complete, claiming to have killed over 150 fighters and dismantling significant tunnels and weapons storage facilities in the last week. Additionally, the army said it retrieved the bodies of 5 Israeli prisoners taken on October 7th. Gaza's government media office reports on Telegram that 255 people were killed and roughly 300 wounded during a 9-day offensive on the eastern outskirts of Khan Younis. The statement added that Israel bombed 31 homes with residents inside, and a total of 320 homes and residential buildings were struck. The World Health Organization has called for a ceasefire to ensure the delivery of vaccines to children. Gaza's health ministry warns of an impending polio epidemic requiring immediate intervention. Israel has so far killed 39,400 Palestinians and injured 90,996 others since October 7th last year. Earlier this month, a report by a number of experts published in the British medical journal The Lancet said the death toll in Gaza could be as high as 186,000. The International Court of Justice has ordered Israel to halt its military operations in Rafah amid accusations of genocide. Palestinian media workers held a protest in memory of journalist Mohammed Abu Dhaka, who was killed by Israeli airstrikes on Khan Younis in southern Gaza. In protest against being targeted by Israeli attacks, the journalists took off their press vests, laid them on the ground, and prayed for their deceased colleagues. The number of journalists killed in Israel's war on Gaza since October 7th has reached 164. The Council on American Islamic Relations, or CAIR, says the surge in anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian hate that erupted last October continued into the first half of 2024. From January to June, the Muslim Civil Rights and Advocacy Organization documented 4,951 incoming complaints, a 69% increase over the same period in 2023. Education discrimination incidents spiked in May as student encampments urging universities to take an anti-genocide stand dominated media headlines. CAIR Research and Advocacy Director Corey Saylor said since last fall, university administrators have been a primary perpetrator of anti-Muslim racism. extremism. He said too many places of higher education, which have historically permitted Islamophobic speakers to poison their campus in the name of academic freedom, apparently find anti-genocide speech intolerable. CAIR data shows that as student protests dominated media coverage of the movement opposing Israel's genocide in Gaza, employers continue to punish employees for their views on the war. Saylor says federal agencies such as Customs and Border Protection and the FBI were also interpreting being Muslim or anti-genocide as suspicious activity. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Dallas suburb of Mckin has rejected a proposal to build a mosque in the city. At a meeting, more than 60 residents voiced their opposition to the proposal for a new 37,000 square foot mosque by the Mckin Islamic Association. They claim the house of worship will cause potential traffic congestion and impact property values. Mckin Islamic Association President Samad Sayed said some comments bordered on blatant Islamophobia. One resident said he was worried that his children would be indoctrinated after walking past a mosque. However, meeting participant Reverend Mali Baum urged toward openness and understanding while sharing her positive experiences with the Muslim community. The zoning request will appear before the City Council on August 6th. However, the Islamic Association may delay the proposal to address concerns and conduct further studies. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon, is urging American citizens in the country to prepare crisis plans and leave the country amid fears of an Israeli attack. Tension has escalated between Hezbollah and Israel following a missile attack on the Druze town of Majd al-Shams in Israel-occupied Golan Heights on Saturday. While Israel blames Hezbollah for the attack, which killed 12 people and injured 40 others, the Lebanese group has denied any responsibility. U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Consular Affairs Rina Bitter told American citizens in Lebanon that in case commercial flight is not available, they should be prepared to shelter in place for long periods of time. According to Israel's Army radio, the military has formulated scenarios for a potential attack on Hezbollah and placed them on the table for political level discussions to assess the situation. Biden proposes Supreme Court overhaul ahead of the 2024 election. Details after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. President Joe Biden has unveiled a plan for strong reform of the Supreme Court ahead of the 2024 election. Outlined in a Washington Post op-ed, his proposal calls for term limits for justices and a binding ethics code. It also suggests eliminating lifetime appointments. It proposes introducing an 18-year term with a new justice appointed every 2 years by the sitting president. As well, Biden is calling for stringent ethics rules in the proposal. These include mandatory disclosure of gifts, a ban on political activities, and recusal from cases involving conflicts of interest. The suggested reforms come amid widespread public support for term limits. Polls show 67% of Americans are in favor of this. However, with a divided Congress, the proposal would require a two-thirds majority or a constitutional convention for approval. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has declared his ambition to transform the U.S. into the world's foremost cryptocurrency hub. In a recent speech at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, Tennessee, he said Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies would be mined, minted, and made in the U.S. He also said, "Bitcoin is going to the moon, and I want America to lead the way." His speech resonated strongly with crypto enthusiasts, resulting in a 3% surge in Bitcoin's price, now about $69,600. Earlier this month, Bitcoin's price had dropped below $52,000, marking its lowest level since February. Trump criticized the Biden administration's stance on crypto, pledging to dismantle current regulations and replace SEC Chairman Gary Gensler. Trump also criticized people who see Bitcoin as a threat to the U.S. dollar, claiming it wasn't Bitcoin, but the behavior of the current government that is threatening the dollar. A New York judge has barred former National Rifle Association President Wayne LaPierre from holding any paid position within the organization for the next 10 years. The ruling, which was announced on Monday, comes as part of a civil trial led by New York Attorney General Letitia James. The decision follows a Manhattan jury's findings that LaPierre, along with other NRA leaders, misused millions of dollars for extravagant personal trips and other questionable expenditures. Despite stepping down from his role in January, LaPierre has been ordered to pay $4.3 million in damages, though more than $1 million in damages has already been paid. The court opted against appointing an independent monitor to oversee the NRA's operations. Bangladesh observed a day of national mourning today. This was in memory of the victims of recent protests over quota reforms in government jobs. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina Wajid called on religious communities across the country to offer prayers for the deceased and those injured. The government said at least 150 people had been killed in the unrest so far. However, the Naya Diganta Daily published a list of 266 individuals, many of whom were students killed by gunshot wounds during the violent protests. Clashes began on July 15th between police and protesters demanding an end to a quota. That reserved 30% of government jobs for relatives of veterans who fought in the country's 1971 War of Independence. The Supreme Court later ordered the government to scale back job quotas. It was then reduced to 5%, and the quotas for ethnic minorities, transgender people, and disabled individuals were limited to 2%. Iran has sharply criticized Germany's closure of the Islamic Center Hamburg and police raids on 53 properties linked to it. Germany's Interior Ministry has labeled the center and its affiliates an Islamist extremist organization with anti-constitutional goals. Iran's acting foreign minister Ali Bagheri Kani denounced the closure, calling it a politically motivated act driven by Islamophobia and aligned with Zionist interests. The ministry also has plans to close 4 Shia mosques. Germany's foreign minister Annalena Baerbock says the center can challenge the ban through legal channels. Algerian athletes at the Olympics honored the victims of the 1961 Paris massacre by tossing flowers into the Seine River during the game's opening ceremony on Friday. On October 17, 1961, approximately 30,000 Algerians gathered in Paris to peacefully demonstrate for their country's independence from France. French police responded with brutality, killing an estimated 200 Algerians, many of whom were beaten and thrown into the river. The athletes marked the event by laying red roses in the Seine River from their boat, with some cheering "Long live Algeria" in Arabic. This act of remembrance follows President Emmanuel Macron's 2021 acknowledgement of the massacre when he condemned what he called the unforgivable crimes committed that night. Here's a special report by Muslim Network TV on the Algerian peacekeepers massacred in Paris.
Algerians wanted freedom from the 132 years of French occupation. Since France and Algeria were one country before its independence, Algerians living in Paris also stood for freedom. This is when French hatred of Muslims caused a massacre in Paris. Yes, the massacre of Muslim Algerians in Paris. The French historian Emmanuel Blanchard called it the most deadly repression in Western Europe since World War II. But no one talks about what the French did, so it is important to remember. It was October 17, 1961. 30,000 Algerians, men, women, and children dressed up to march for freedom. They marched from Paris ghettos towards the city. They had no arms, they were peaceful. The head of Paris police, Maurice Papin, however, did not like Algerians standing up for freedom. He decided to give Algerians a taste of what the French were doing in Algeria itself: murder, torture, and exile. He unleashed the 10,000 French National Police to attack. Yes, 10,000 French police attacked the 30,000 peaceful, unarmed Algerians in Paris. Some 12,000 were arrested and bused to internment camps, which were prepared in advance. As night fell, the massacre continued right in the courtyard of the police headquarters, killing tens of victims. Many detainees were injured, but were tortured nevertheless. The massacre did not end that night. For several weeks, unidentified corpses were discovered along the riverbanks. The media did not report the massacre. It was censored. The government denied it. Some anonymous policemen, however, did issue a note. Here are some excerpts. What happened on 17th October 1961 and in the following days against the peaceful demonstrators morally forces us to bring our testimony and to alert public opinion. They were killed with blows from rifle butts and pickaxes. Others had their fingers chopped off. They were trapped over the river bridge from both sides, knocked out, and systematically thrown into the river. In the Parisian police headquarters, torturers threw their victims by the tens in the river Seine, which flows only a few meters from the courtyard, to keep them from being examined by forensic experts. Police also looted their watches and their money. Mr. Papin, the police chief, was present during those dreadful scenes. These anonymous policemen had asked, "The punishment must be extended to all responsible people, whatever their high office may be." No one, however, was ever punished. No one knows how many died in this Paris massacre. The French government kept denying that any massacre had ever happened. Finally, after 51 years in 2012, then French President François Hollande recognized, saying that Algerians protesting for their right to independence were killed during a bloody repression. He, however, did not apologize for that massacre. The French government stood behind the massacring chief. He remained police chief for another 6 years after the massacre. He was later punished for his Nazi ties and deporting Jews, but was never tried for the massacre of Muslims. A plaque on the Saint Michael Bridge sits today close to the police headquarters, not far from Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. It says in French, "Here we drown Algerians."
Ces Algériens au nombre de 30 000 vont converger des hauts lieux de l'immigration algérienne, notamment du bidonville de Nanterre, de Besançon, d'Argenteuil, vont entrer dans Paris par...
Here is a historian, Naïma Hubert Yahi, standing next to the little plaque. It is high time on this 60th anniversary that a strong statement be made at the highest level of the state to recognize the responsibility of the French state in this massacre of civilians, and that we finally turn the page on the so-called disappeared so that historians can work on the archives and establish the reality and extent of this colonial massacre and enumerate the real number of victims so that memorial inflation can stop. Fantasies, whether they be downward or upward, and that we look our common history between France and Algeria in the face. The French called those Algerians they massacred terrorists. And that is how the killer cycle of war, terrorism, and Islamophobia continues. This is Salaha Farouk from Muslim Network TV.
That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. Your support is needed more than ever to continue our mission of providing informative, educational, and inspiring content to Muslims in North America and around the world. Donate now by visiting muslimnetwork.tv/donate. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.